Good evening, guys. Thank you for showing up once again. This is Her Story in the Making. It is our second episode, and we are joined by an incredibly talented content creator in the fantasy football space, as well as an absolute super fan and somebody who's just incredibly fun to interact with at Lindellians on Twitter. Linda, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I don't take compliments well, so now I know that that's how you're going to open the show. I got to be more prepared for that.
I'm the same way. If anybody compliments me, I'm like, what? And like shrink into my little shell. So I'm very good at giving them though. So I feel like we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
we can come to a middle ground on that. But guys, if you're in the chat and have any questions for Linda, please feel free to drop them in there. We will try to get to those in the middle of all of our questions. But I'm just going to dive right into it. So we mentioned that you were an absolute joy to interact with and a super fan, both of the Denver Broncos and Oklahoma State Sooners, or not Sooners. Oh my God, Cowboys.
Don't
That you
do
can
that to
see.
me.
No, I'm like, yep, that have not had enough coffee today. But as you can see by her backdrop, so where did your love of sports come from?
The easy answer would be to say my dad, he played at Oklahoma State, so obviously that's where a lot of it comes from. He actually kicked at Oklahoma State, which is like when I say that, it makes a lot of sense to be like people are like, "Oh, everything's that tracks." But my mom does not get the credit that she deserves for getting me into football. My brother was several years older than me, he was in high school, and I'm a kid, and we go to his high school football games, and like all my friends would get to go like throw the football and run around and go to the concession stand and just, act crazy. And I go, I want to go play with my friends. My mom was like, you're going to sit there and watch your brother play football. So for 4 years, it wasn't like an option. You were watching football on Friday nights. And so it just kind of evolved. And once I found out I could make it competitive, that was pretty game over.
I do get that from you. I do get that you are a highly, highly competitive person. If you guys don't follow Linda on Twitter, please do so. Her live tweeting during any kind of sporting event isn't, it's just so fun and so great. But how did that kind of love of sports get you into playing fantasy football specifically?
It just like I said, I'm massively competitive, so as soon as, like, I can put competition to something. I was talking today about, the World Cups going on, and I don't watch soccer for the most part year-round, but when I can, like, pick a team and be like, "Okay, I have a side that I want to win," that's game over. My dad needed an extra person in a league I had never played before. I was a new mom. I was working like 12-hour shifts waiting tables. I was like, "Dad, I can't draft a team. Like I don't know what that is." So he drafted for me, but I managed it all season. And after that, it was just like getting bit by a bug. Like I got some of my like hometown buddies, one in particular that I was like, "Do you think you have 8 friends that would want to play fantasy football?" I don't know that I have that many friends, but I have you and you have guy friends that play fantasy football. And so it just from there, it became about I want to win.
And it's kind of like a tattoo, right? You get that first taste of it and you just want more and more
Mhm.
and more. In the service industry in particular, I found that it was so fun to talk to your tables about fantasy football, and that, like, gave you that extra just kind of connection with your tables and, like, "Yeah, she's a cool girl," kind of aspect to
Oh,
it, you
yeah,
know?
absolutely. When
I
you can drop football knowledge on a table of, like, especially where I'm from, there's a lot of, like, oil field guys, so, like, 10 dudes will come in to eat lunch, and, like, if sports are on, guaranteed I'm gonna drop of just the littlest crumb so they know I know what the hell is up. Like, I need you to understand I'm with it.
and it's the best look on their face, seeing
Absolutely.
that look of the light bulb going off, like, "Oh my god, she knows something about football. What?" It's the best.
Exactly.
So when did that kind of passion for playing fantasy football evolve from being just a fan to wanting to be a creator? How did you know that you wanted to start creating fantasy football content?
God, I don't know anything. Every day I wake up and go like, "We're gonna we're gonna give this a go," in whatever wave. But really, it was just getting involved with the community, and there was a lot of like I was interacting with everybody, and there were certainly opportunities to contribute. But just the more I like submerged myself in it, the more I was like, "Oh, first of all, I work next to my mother, and so all day, every this guy, and he's a PPR magnet, and he's like, blah 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 blah, and she's like, I don't know what you're saying to me. She listens, God bless her, but she, it just became like, oh, I can like talk about this thing, I can write about it, I can get online and talk to my friends about it, and people will watch or listen. Insane. And so it's just fun. No,
No,
Joy, you
Troy,
cannot have my
that was a
autograph.
hard no. That was a hard no. Um, and moms, right? God bless them. They're so supportive, even if they, don't really know what we're talking
She is.
about.
She
I
really
know
is.
I've been in that arena as well. Mom will read my article and be like, "Well, I don't really know what you're talking about, but it sounds really smart, so
Sure,
let's
John.
let's go." All right, so that's a 1 and 1, 1 yes and 1 no. Um, so this is the cool thing about what you do in fantasy football. You have focused on such a niche aspect of fantasy football, and if you guys watching don't know, it's kickers and kicker tiers, and that's such a kind of controversial position in the fantasy football space. People are always railing about abolish kickers or do this, do that. Um, but your rankings have actually helped me in particular, gain that edge in a difficult matchup. So how did you decide that kickers were where you wanted to focus first? And then what factors kind of go into constructing your rankings?
I think it was really just, again, like, I enjoyed the streaming, like, articles and doing that and finding matchups that, you can exploit, be it quarterback, tight end, defense, or kicker. Like, those are the 4 positions I think in regular redraft leagues you're talking about streaming. And so I've always enjoyed that aspect. I feel like kickers don't get near the attention as, say, quarterback, tight end for sure. And tight end is another phew, hard pass for me. But I it just became, like I said, I'm not like making cognitive decisions like, okay, this is what I've set out to do. I'm gonna write about kickers. I'm gonna make people care. Cause like you started and you were like, you do a cool thing, which is cool is debatable. But it just be I was pretty good at it. And I have the dad's a kicker thing that like really carries my story, you know? And I've always been about target audience, know your audience, like focus on that. The rest will come when it comes. So it was just about, hey, this is the thing I'm good at. I might as well capitalize on it. As for like what goes into them, it's a lot of over unders, looking at implied point totals. But I would be lying if I said there wasn't a percentage, just a gut instinct. Like there's only so much math and like odds you can weigh when you're looking at a kicker before you go like, and also it just feels right, which is, and like I'm honest about that. I tell people all the time, sometimes this is just my gut feeling on this one. And it doesn't always work out, but nobody's right 100% of the time. So, you got to take it in waves. When I'm right though, boy, that feels good.
Does it though, right? Like, oh my God. But I think that that's really refreshing too, that you do use that gut instinct because there are so many people who are just like process over results and it's process, 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 like numbers, numbers, numbers. And the just kind of you can't be right on numbers alone all the time. And I think that that gut feeling is kind of what makes your stuff unique and what makes it so good because you are putting that little piece of your instinct and your knowledge in your rankings rather than just looking at, a spreadsheet. I know you do use spreadsheets, but just not that alone. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah,
It's
we're trying to predict humans. It's insane to think that like this math equation is going to equal the right thing. That's not ever how it's going to be. So you got to add a little humanness to it.
add your spice, girl. So, when you started creating content, did you ever think that it was going to turn into a career, or did it just evolve based on word of mouth and your interactions on Twitter? You do have a great, huge following on Twitter. And again, I'm going to plug you again. If you guys aren't following Linda, you're doing yourself a disservice. She's awesome. So, but yeah, how did your career kind of evolve?
Man, like, last when we did well, like, podcasting, I was very nervous to start podcasting. I don't like the sound of my own voice. I get called a lot in drive-throughs, like, there's some trauma there, but, Troy King, who I denied an autograph to, reached out to me when, John and Mitch from Dynasty Theory wanted to have a podcast, and they asked Troy to join. They wanted one more person, and Troy reached out. He had to talk me into it a little bit. Like, I was very nervous. We did that for a year, and they truly built my confidence. Like, I would not be where I am at all without that. John was such a good host, and it was just all really easy and welcoming, and they encouraged my streamer stuff and kicker stuff, and we ended that show, talking with them. John was like, "You shouldn't do, like, end of season kicker rankings." He was like, "Do it every week." And I was like, "Well, that's an idea." And so last season, I started doing them every week and just posting them on Twitter, and they got pretty good traction, and I was happy with that. Like, that's I almost cried, Troy, don't don't. But, that Matthew Berry reached out to me, and a kicker that I had fairly low, that week. He asked why I had them low. I explained my reasoning, and that was a call that I was like, "It's a little bit gut here. Like, this is what I'm looking at, but also it's a little gut." And so I told him who I would play instead. He played that kicker. Thank God it worked out on on my behalf for him. It worked out well. And, a couple days later, he was like, "You got a minute to talk on the phone?" And I'm at work, like, at my full-time job. Like, yeah, I do." I'm like, I'll
Like,
figure
"Sorry, boss, I have
I'm
to
gonna
take
go
a
to the
break."
bathroom. Like,
Yes.
yeah,
This is a call that
and,
I am not missing.
but it was never I never thought I never could have thought that it would find its way onto a newsletter that goes out and a website that's so wildly visited. I could have never imagined.
Well, and let's touch on that a little bit. How did that phone call go? Like, just from a human perspective, just the
It was
excitement, the nerves, the just
wild. You
everything
could
about it.
I could hear the nerves in my voice, like, I was legit shaking, and I'm, like, in the hallway of my office. I work in an office building, it's, like, 5 stories high, like, definitely other offices hear me in the hallway talking, and, it was just it was surreal. It was absolutely surreal, and my bosses are all very just like my mom, very supportive. They're like, "We're ready to see you on ESPN." I'm like, "Pump your brakes. Pump your brakes. I'm still coming here, 8 to 5 every day." So, but they were like, "Absolutely, make the phone call. Like, if you need to go home, go home." And I'm like, "I don't need to go home. I just need to step out for a minute."
Yeah,
But
let
they
me collect
it was
myself for a
surreal.
sec.
It was crazy.
Yeah, I love that for you. And so now that we're kind of on the topic of fantasy life, I was gonna ask, tell us a little bit about it and how you got started there, but now we know that there was a phone call. But, what exactly, for those who don't know, is Fantasy Life and the app? And just tell us a little bit about what you do for them.
Well, the website is fantasylife.com, and my rankings are there. They go up, like, I'll finish them when I get done with this show. I go after that, and then I'll finish those up. I usually Tuesday nights are usually pretty late for me. By the time I get done working, I'm like, "Okay, now I need another hour to, like, not work," and it's already 11. That's a problem, but they go up on Wednesday morning, and then, the Fantasy Life newsletter comes out 5 days a week. Actually, we might be up to 7 days a week. Double check me on that. You don't have to. I'm talking to the people, but comes out every day, and, my blurbs drop. I do, like, a streaming blurb on Fridays that come out, and they just go straight to your email. They're great. There's waiver wires, we have a Discord. It's like a really big community from last year where it was, like, 7 of us just absolutely winging it to this entire company and so many moving parts now. It's crazy.
And that's the newsletter is completely free too, right?
Yep.
You don't even have to, yeah, it's not a subscription, just sign up and then it comes directly to you. Like, very low effort with a ton of great information. Um, so I wanna kinda backtrack a little bit. You said that you hated the sound of your voice, which is something that I can totally relate to. Hearing myself played back on a podcast just gives
Ugh.
me the utmost ick.
Mhm.
So do you prefer, podcasting or writing more now that you've been doing it for a little while? And, do you approach each one a little bit differently?
I definitely approach them differently. I think I still prefer podcasts because I have a tendency to um, really second guess myself when I'm writing, where like if I sit down and write and I don't reread it as I'm writing, I'm usually okay. But if I write a paragraph and then I reread it, I will hyperfixate on that paragraph until it becomes like a legit problem. Like now I'm pushing a deadline because I can't decide on how I want one sentence worded. Whereas when I'm on a mic, like it's coming out of my mouth. There's no time to second guess. I'm gonna say the thing. And sometimes I'm like, oof, I shouldn't have said that thing, but it's too late. It's already out in the open. And so I think I prefer podcasting. I'm definitely looser on a podcast where like I'm trying to be better about working my personality and writing without, like, completely going like, "Nah," you know, insane with it, and still doing the numbers and the analysis part. So finding, like, a happy median there with writing has been a little bit more difficult, but, I think this year is probably the most I've written, so, I'm definitely getting my practice in.
I think definitely finding your personality in writing is a very fine line and a fine balance to walk because, like you said, you're trying to include all the numbers in there, but you're trying to not make it sound like a math exam or, an ACT or something like that. And that's something that I've kind of struggled with as well. I tend to hyperfixate on the numbers and don't necessarily like throw in the little sprinkles on top that make me me. So I completely relate to that. But I'm gonna switch gears a little bit here. Is there a favorite moment in particular in your career that you can kind of pinpoint? And if there is, just tell us a little bit about that.
This is, like, maybe a kind of a weird way to answer this question, but I talked about meeting with Troy and John and Mitch and, like, them helping build my confidence, but that's what it was just, like, finding my corner of people that rooted for me and checked my work and that I was able to, like, bounce ideas off of, and just finding, like, a community within the community, I think was really important to being brave enough to put out there or put myself out there at least. I needed to have people that like if something went tragically wrong, I could turn to, or when things go right, I can share with them and they understand like what I'm talking about. Cause like, sure, my mom gets excited, but like getting into Scott Fishbowl was something where she was like, okay. Whereas
Like,
like,
that's
you
cool.
tell your friends that no, and they're like, hell yeah. Like it was just really important for me and for getting to where I am now to have that, like, home base of a group of people that I could rely on.
Well, and your Twitter following grew really quickly too, didn't it? Didn't it just
Yeah.
kind of explode? How did you kind of deal with that? I know for me personally, when I started, getting a following and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not just yelling into the void anymore. Like there are people who actually are listening to what I'm saying." How how did that affect you? Um, did you get my case of imposter syndrome? Did you get
Oh, yeah,
the like
I have imposter syndrome every single day. I think a lot of people do, and so that's just, like but for me, it was about I used to use Twitter as this, like, diary of sorts. I could just say whatever I wanted, and I remember the first time that I tweeted something about, like, "Today really kicked me in the teeth," or whatever it was that I said. I was having a low day, and there were so many replies, and I was like, "Okay, so I have to use this differently now. This is not the same app that it used to be." So there was, like, certainly an adjustment period where I went, like, full football. Now I'm kind of back to, like, I'll tweet about football. I'm gonna tweet about my everyday stuff too. Like, it's all a part of me, and I don't advertise as, like, a strictly fantasy football account, so it's another thing where, like, finding a fine line between, like, sharing funny stories about my kid or, like, some TV show or book that I'm reading and still giving football advice to you gotta sprinkle some in. You gotta sprinkle them in. It's important to remember that we're human.
exactly. If we were all stats all the time, that would just be completely like just no fun. Nobody
That'd be
wants
a
to
tough
just
timeline.
yeah, if you wanna read stats all the time, take a stat class, but, um, kind of building on that, did you get any backlash from the people who had followed you thinking that you were a strictly football account, like when you do share those personal stories? Or has the community been pretty supportive as a whole?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever like I mean, I'm sure people are like, "This is not what I came here for," and, like, dip, which is fine. I am not for but I'm not gonna put myself in some box to fit, like, somebody else's idea of me. This is who I am. I'm gonna share like it like I said, I'm gonna share the funny stories about my kid or, like, what her and I do throughout the day, but I've never had anybody be like, "This isn't what I followed you for," because I'd be like, "Then don't follow me."
Yeah, there's
It
a
would
really
be
easy way to not
yeah,
do that.
then why are you here? You know? So,
Exactly.
I didn't really have a whole lot of backlash on that, thank God, because I would've mm,
Just, like, shut down and crawled into a little bubble or gone the
yeah.
other direction and just
Yeah, I
exploded.
think I would've gone to the other side of that spectrum.
Yep. Well, both are valid, so, um, but talking a little bit about the challenges that, maybe people have responded with on Twitter, going back to football, have you faced any challenges, being a both new to the space and being a woman in a very male-dominated field, and then definitely in that, as a kicker analyst, which is something that not many people do at all. Um, can you talk a little bit about that and just kind of how you've dealt with that?
Oh, I don't deal with anything. We push all the feelings down, dissociate, read a book, but, in all seriousness, like, yeah, I mean, I've had dudes be like, I'll give a take and people are like, "Oh, this is why women shouldn't talk about sports," and you're like, "Alright, dude." Like, I've been hearing that for 15 years. It doesn't have the zing you think it does. Like, I don't know who you're trying who's feel like people are like, "I'll get to the kitchen." I did. I cooked a meal and then I sat down and watched football. Sometimes I cook while football's on in my kitchen. Like, it's okay to like both. It's okay to be both. It's okay to not watch football because you feel like watching a rom-com. It doesn't like invalidate you being a sports fan at all. I think I've probably gotten more backlash for pro kicker takes than being a woman in the space, at least in the last like year or so. You know, you get the creepy guys in your DMs and all the normal stuff that just happened to women on the internet. Occasionally you get a jackass. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. That thinks that you don't have valid opinions because the anatomy. But anyway, the kicker thing is definitely like I have people be I've been pretty brutalized about it. I was on a show once that did not go well and to the point where like I didn't talk for an hour as we finished the show just so I could get off and cry. And I'm a crier. Like people are like when you like block somebody on whatever and there's all these like arguments and oh you're so soft. Yeah, dude. Yes, I am. Don't be mean to me. I'll cry.
And that's
I think that
okay.
like, at least I know. I'm not I'm not going out of like, if you're mean to me for no reason, I'm gonna cry. I'm not gonna
Yep.
cry in front of you, but I am going to cry, and if I blue, it's because I don't wanna see it. I don't need that, I don't want it. You don't like, you clearly don't like me. I don't understand why, like, as adults most of us are adults. I realize there are some children in Hutch, specifically in the community, but, like, for the most part, we're adults, and we have people arguing about, like, "Well, I blocked him and he blocked me." Okay, like each other. Just don't like each other and move on. What's the issue? So like, have never understood that. Of course, you get a lot of backlash, women are emotional or whatever the hell it is, but yeah, I am. Congratulations, you nailed it.
Well, women might cry, but at least we don't break TVs.
Yeah,
So
and I've
there's 2
never
ends of the
on my wall.
spectrum of being emotional.
Yeah. And I have
Um,
I'll cry if my football team loses and wins sometimes depending on the win. I don't care. I'm soft as shit.
and I love it. I think that that realness is something that we need in the community, going back to saying that how you balance your Twitter account with real life things and fantasy football. I think that showing yourself as a real person gives that extra, just credence to what you're doing as an analyst. Like, you're not some robot who's on a paper, like, just spitting out takes. The Patrick Mahomes thing, I know you and I were both critical of Mahomes at one point in time. Some guy the other day pulled up a tweet from May and like replied to it. And this was at 12:30 at night. And I was just like, do you not have anything better to do? And then I
Who
had
has
to
the time?
yeah, and then I had to realize, you know what? It's one person. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And I think that's very, very important. And I want you to give some advice of what you think is important to others trying to create a career in fantasy sports or just get into the industry or some things that you wish you knew when you started.
Well, like I said, I think it's really important to find like a home base and a community within inside the community. It doesn't have to be people you work with, can be people you just enjoy talking to. The group of friends that I've made doing this, like we get on a Zoom call on Friday nights and hang out. Like my hometown friends will be like, "Oh, you want to go to the bar?" Can't, sorry, have to get on a Zoom call with a bunch of my internet friends. And we like it started, we would do mock drafts and talk about fantasy football, but the more it's evolved, and we're talking about like 2 years going on, maybe more. And so the more it's evolved, like I'm friends with some of their wives, and I like with one of my buddies' wives. We're book buddies. We talk about what we're reading. And so I think finding that community is really important. Um, but also just to remember that, like, nobody is perfect. You're going to be wrong sometimes, and the advice you give, like, people always talk about, "Oh, I don't watch my fantasy leagues while games are on," and I don't either, but I'm really cognitive about what advice I gave and is it hitting, and to just, like, remember that it's okay if you're wrong. You are not gonna be right 100% of the time. Adjust if it becomes an issue. Like, sometimes it's a process issue, and you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what the issue is, but really, it's about if you say anything confidently, people will believe you. Just be confident, and which is, like, such a horseshit coming out of my mouth because 'cause I'm, like, not confident at all, but if you pretend to be, people will believe you.
I am bookmarking this right here to replay to myself over and over again because I personally needed that advice. Thank you so much for giving that, not just to everybody else out there, but to me. Guys, if you're in the chat and you have any questions for Linda, throw them up there. We are getting kind of up against it. But before we go, tell us a little more about your work and where everybody can find you.
Well, like I said, you can find my rankings every Wednesday morning. They're weekly rankings for on fantasylife.com for kickers. Everybody else's rankings are also there. I don't do any other rankings but kickers, so you'll have to go to the kicker position to even see my name. Don't let that deter you when you get there and my name's not there. Um, and then I have a blurb that drops in the free newsletter on Fridays. And then during the week, I write an article for Reception Perception that's just a recap of their podcast every week. James Coe and Matt Harmon do a fantastic podcast. They make me laugh. I learn something every week. So it's a really fun article for me to do because I'm always like, by the end of it, so much smarter than I was before I started this. And it drops every week. And like I said, their podcast is great. But if you don't have time to listen to an hour-long podcast, I try to get all the good nuggets in there. And it drops usually on Thursdays.
It's like Cliff Notes for podcasts. I love it.
Exactly.
And we can also find you on Fantasy Besties too, right?
Yes. Fantasy Besties on Monday before the game kicks off, which is another just group of people that I adore, and they're such a pain in my ass, but I love them to bits. And we never get through a show sheet, and it's so much fun. I hope it's as fun for people that watch and listen as it is for us because we have a blast.
Yeah, somebody just goes off on a weird tangent and then it like completely derails the whole train. And
It
it's
gets
never the
weird
same
every week.
person. It's never
Right,
the same person.
right.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been my absolute pleasure. I'm going to shower you in compliments again because I think you're amazing. It's like that Lady Gaga meme. Amazing, smart, intelligent, beautiful. I'm just doing all that to you right now, but really appreciate you coming on here. Our next show is going to be on December 13th. And I hope you guys come back and check that out and give Linda a follow. Again, if you are not following her, you are doing yourself a disservice. So hope everybody has a good night and hope that y'all enjoyed her story.
Thank you, babe.